So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just lost their top 2 offensive weapons in the same game. One of them is out for the season, with another missing at least the next few weeks. Some are even blaming head coach Todd Bowles for these injuries, which is pretty wild. But the Bucs were far from the only team to get hit with crucial injuries, and in today's video, I'll dive into all that and more as I take a look at the biggest surprises and standout performances from Week 7 of the 2024 NFL season right after. Alright, there was a lot of craziness that ensued Week 7 of the 2024 NFL season. First up, the London Jaguars steamrolled the Patriots so bad that Gerard Mayo said this about his own team after the game.
After the game, I felt like we just went out there and played soft. We're playing soft at the moment.
I mean, it's not hard to blame him considering they allowed 171 yards on the ground, and at one point the Jaguars ran the ball 18 times in a row in the second half. Travis Etienne didn't even play, but Tank Bigsby lived up to his first name, rushing for 118 yards and 2 tutties on the day. And despite losing 32-16, Drake May looked solid for the most part in his second NFL start. He was 26 of 37 for 276 yards and 2 touchdowns. Another quarterback who looked good was Geno Smith, who tossed a couple of touchdowns himself as the Seahawks dominated the Falcons in Atlanta to end their 3-game losing streak. DK Metcalf was actually 1 yard shy of 100 on the day, catching 5 passes that included this 35-yarder from Jackson Smith and Jigba on a nice little trick play. Then on 3rd and 15, he reeled in this dart from Geno Smith for the touchdown. Sadly, though, he was carted off the field in the 4th quarter with a knee injury, and today it was reported that he suffered an MCL sprain and is going to be week to week. So I guess that is some good news, because anytime you see a player get carted off, you start to assume they're probably out for the season, but an MCL sprain seems pretty good, all things considered. Week 7 was filled with injuries, unfortunately, with this next game in particular featuring a ton of them. The Chiefs and 49ers squared off in a Super Bowl rematch, and it was a wild game, especially early on. The Niners started out by going 3 and out. The Chiefs came up short on a fake punt on 4th and 1. Then on the very next play, Brock Purdy threw this pick to Justin Reed. Then on the Chiefs' next possession, Mahomes' pass got tipped up at the line and was intercepted by this big old D lineman. He threw another one, Mahomes did, on their first drive of the second half as Xavier Worthy got tripped up on his route. And those 2 interceptions pissed Mahomes off so much that he trucked this poor little boy in the end zone to blow off some steam, and that put the Chiefs up 21-12 in the 4th quarter. They went on to win 28-18, and Patrick Mahomes became just the second quarterback in the last 30 years to start out 6-0 despite throwing more interceptions than touchdowns, as he now has 6 passing TDs to 8 INTs so far this year. That other quarterback, by the way, was Peyton Manning in 2015, and they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Now, like I alluded to earlier, this game was not without its fair share of injuries. Deebo Samuel came into the game with an illness, tried to play through it, yet lasted just 3 snaps before heading back to the locker room, was ruled out the rest of the game, and it was just recently reported, as of when I'm recording this video, that he was dealing with pneumonia-like symptoms, fluid in his lungs, and he's currently in the hospital. Then, this is a big one. Brandon Ayuk took a shot from Chiefs safety Chamari Connor late in the 2nd quarter and was down on the field writhing in pain before being carted off. And if you look at the replay, it was nasty shot to his knee, basically, from the contact. And Kyle Shanahan said after the game that he's feared to have torn his ACL. Well, Monday, it was reported that, sadly, that was indeed the case. Not only that, but apparently he tore his MCL as well as his ACL. I'm glad he got a bag. He got his long-term contract locked up and all that, but that is another major loss for the Niners team that's been going through hell this entire season. As for the Chiefs, Juju Smith-Schuster, who was pretty much their main wideout after losing Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice for the season, he was nursing a hamstring injury heading into this game, and he re-aggravated it in the 1st quarter and was quickly ruled out. Then, their starting cornerback opposite Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, he fractured his ankle and is likely headed to IR, where he could possibly miss the entire rest of the season. Speaking of injured Watsons, Deshaun Watson's season is over after he tore his Achilles and the Browns lost to the Bengals on Sunday. Late in the 2nd quarter, Deshaun tried planting off his right foot, and you can see his Achilles pop here as he immediately went down in pain and had to get carted off. You could reportedly hear some Browns fans in the stadium cheering as he went down. I watched the video of his injury, and it did sound like some were definitely cheering, which is kind of wild. I understand he was playing poorly. He's got the off-the-field stuff that he dealt with as well, but just an odd ordeal altogether. Then, Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in to replace Watson, and he sustained what Ian Rappaport is calling a major finger injury on his throwing hand. And depending on how he responds to treatment and how he's able to grip a football, he could be out for a long period of time. So now down 2 QBs, Jameis Winston, who was for whatever reason made the emergency quarterback in this game, he had to come in as the emergency QB and finished out the game. He's going to be the starter moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future as well. And this is pretty crazy. The Browns were the first team since the Chiefs back in 2008 to have 3 different quarterbacks attempt 10 or more passes in a game. That's probably the most Cleveland Browns stat I've ever heard. And it probably goes without saying, but yes, the Browns lost this game and moved to 1-6 on the season. And while it was mostly all bad for the Browns on Sunday, the silver lining is that Nick Chubb was back for his first game in over a year after he had that gruesome knee injury in week 2 of the 2023 NFL season. He wasn't super efficient or anything like that, 22 yards on 11 carries, but he got in the end zone here on 4th and goal, and it was a pretty cool moment, all things considered. The Browns were already toast this season long before Watson got hurt. Let's just be honest here. I mean, they basically acknowledged that themselves when they traded their best receiver, Amari Cooper, last week to the Bills. Well, he didn't take long to make an impact as a Buffalo Bill either. Watch this play right here. Buffalo was within striking distance in the red zone with Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman lined up out to the left. And you can see Josh Allen, he checks to a different play, kill, can, whatever he said. And Cooper seemed to be confused on what his route was supposed to be since Allen changed to the alternate play. Well, he looks to Keon Coleman for help, and Keon appears to give him some direction, basically pointing out straight. Well, whatever he did definitely worked because Josh Allen fired it to Amari Cooper over the middle for his first touchdown as a Buffalo Bill. They proceeded to beat the piss out of the Titans, by the way, though the game started out a little iffy as the Titans took a quick 10-0 lead in the second quarter behind Mason Rudolph, who was filling in for the injured Will Levis. Buffalo began to catch fire, though, and proceeded to score 34 unanswered points as they moved to 5-2 on the year and 3-0 at home. The Titans, meanwhile, fell to 1-5, with their season being as good as over. But something that's not over is DeAndre Hopkins' reception streak. He may only have caught 1 ball on Sunday, and that 1 ball may have resulted in them losing 2 yards, but it was good enough to pass up Keyshawn Johnson for the second most consecutive games with a reception to start a career. That's actually pretty crazy to think about. DeAndre Hopkins has never played in a game and not caught a pass in his entire career. So yeah, a cool stat, but that game was not at all close in the end. However, the Texans-Packers game certainly was. If you were to look at just the QB stats, you would have swore the Packers blew them out. CJ Stroud was just 10 of 21 for 86 yards and 0 touchdowns. He struggled big time in this one as he was under duress all game long. Get this, the Packers sent 5 or more pass rushers on only 17.2% of the Texans' dropbacks, yet Stroud was pressured on more than half of his dropbacks, meaning the Packers didn't even have to blitz and they still got consistent pressure. That's hard to do as a defense and hard to overcome as an offense. Then when you look at Jordan Love's stats, he did throw 2 picks, but he was 24 of 33 for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns, by the way, was to Josh Jacobs, and believe it or not, that is his first receiving touchdown of his career. He's been in the league since 2019 and had caught over 200 passes since then, but Sunday was actually the first time he found pay dirt after making a catch. But back to the game, because it really did come down to the wire. The Texans hit a go-ahead field goal with a little under 2 minutes to go to put them up 22-21, but the Packers put together a perfect drive, nickel and diming their way down the field, draining the clock and setting up Brandon McManus for a 45-yard field goal, who just signed with the team leading up to the game, and he just snuck it in with the Packers winning 24-22. So the Packers moved to 5-2 as they're jumbled up in the most competitive division in football. The NFC North. And there was quite the showdown between the two top dogs in that division on Sunday. The 5-0 Vikings hosted the red-hot 5-1 Lions, and this game did not disappoint. Dan Campbell opted for a fake punt on 4th and 7 from their own 33-yard line, which the Vikings shut down, and Aaron Jones made them pay with a 34-yard touchdown run. The Vikings took a 10-0 lead, but Detroit came roaring back, scoring 21 unanswered points, with Jahmyr Gibbs accounting for 2 of them, including this 45-yard run in which he sent this man's ankles into the shadow realm. Skipping ahead to the fourth quarter, the Vikings hit this field goal to make it 28-23. Then Josh Metellus punched the ball out of David Montgomery's hands, and Ivan Pace scooped it up and housed it to give the Vikings the lead. However, they couldn't get the 2-point conversion, and they were up 29-28, and that was ultimately the killer in this one, as Jared Goff diced them up on the final drive, and Jake Bates hit the 44-yard field goal to give the Vikings their first loss of the season, with Detroit leapfrogging them in the division standings. It was one hell of a game and another dominant showing by the Lions offense, who was coming off of 2 straight 40 burgers. They then put up 31 on what at the time was the 5th best scoring defense. Then get this, in their last 4 games, the Lions have scored more touchdowns, 18, than Goff has thrown incompletions, 15. That is insane and sounds like a fake, made-up BS stat, but it's not, and Goff is definitely a name to watch out for in the MVP race. Next up, the Raiders may have lost on Sunday to the Rams, but they definitely hit on their first-round pick this year. They took tight end Brock Bowers 13th overall, and he has 100% lived up to the hype. He's become the Raiders' unquestioned #1 target, especially after Davante Adams got traded to the Jets, and he once again led the team in targets, receptions, and yards this past Sunday. And after his 10-catch, 93-yard performance, he became 15th all-time in catches by a rookie tight end, as he now has 47 on the year. He's just 40 catches away, by the way, from breaking the rookie record that Sam Laporta set just last year. And if Brock can stay healthy, he should have no problem doing that, considering he's averaging almost 7 catches a game and is on pace for 114 receptions this season. He's second in the entire NFL in receptions and is 8th in receiving yards with 477. Keep in mind, he's doing this with Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell throwing him the football. Speaking of which, the Raiders benched Minshew last week after he won the starting job in camp, and O'Connell got the start last week and again this past Sunday in LA. Well, O'Connell fractured his thumb on Sunday, and the Raiders placed him on IR, with him expected to miss at least 4 to 6 weeks. So it's back to Gardner Minshew for now, which may not be the worst thing in the world, considering they should probably aim to lose as many games as possible and look to draft a quarterback high in the first round anyways. And if that's the goal, then Minshew played an A-plus game, throwing 3 picks and 0 touchdowns. And hey, speaking of quarterbacks getting benched, Danny Dimes was benched in the fourth quarter against the Eagles on Sunday after they were down 28-3. This man couldn't even throw for 100 yards through almost 3.5 quarters, and Brian Daboll had to bring Drew Lock in, who didn't do any better. The Giants will definitely be competing with the Raiders in the quarterback tankathon, as I can't imagine Daniel Jones is still around next year, regardless of how much dead cap they have to eat in order to move on from him. I mean, if the Broncos can do it, move on from Russell Wilson and eat all that dead money, so can the Giants. We'll talk about Russell Wilson in a bit, though, because he had a hell of a game himself. Let's move back to the Giants real quick. They're now 2-5 and 0-4 at home, which is not great. On the bright side for the G-men, Dexter Lawrence is a freaking monster, and he got 2 more sacks on Sunday, bringing his total on the year to 9, which leads the NFL. On the dark side, they let Saquon Barkley walk in free agency, and he signed with their division rival and just torched them this last matchup. I talked about this in my video from Friday, but one of the things I was looking forward to this weekend was seeing Saquon Barkley go back to New York and take on his former team. Well, he was also looking forward to that, and he's probably pretty happy with how things turned out, because he ran for 176 yards on just 17 carries and punched in a touchdown from 3 yards out. Get this, between rushing and receiving, Saquon finished with 187 yards. The entire Giants team, they had 119 yards, so big ol' yikes. And again, they also had to bench their $160 million quarterback and watch the man they refused to pay top dollar to eviscerate them in the same game. It really was a day of poetic justice, and I don't know what it is, but Daniel Jones refuses to throw touchdown passes in front of his own fans. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass at MetLife Stadium since 2022. Yes, 2 seasons ago. Next up, Anthony Richardson made his return from injury and played a piss-poor game, at least when throwing the ball, yet it was enough to get the dub over the sorry-ass Dolphins 16-10. Tyler Huntley injured his shoulder and had to leave the game early, with Tim Boyle coming in and finishing the game. But fear not, Dolphins fans, because it was announced on Monday that Tua Tagovailoa is returning to practice and is planning on starting next Sunday against the Cardinals. Tua's been out since he suffered that concussion in Week 2, spending most of the season so far on IR. Mike McDaniel said that several medical experts deemed it safe for him to return, and while he technically hasn't passed concussion protocol yet, that should come later in the week as he aims to play Sunday. Something I found interesting is that Tua is not planning on wearing a Guardian cap and actually never even considered it. I mean, I don't think anybody would question him or even make fun of him for wearing one given his history, but he is a grown man and is allowed to make that decision for himself. I certainly hope he's able to stay healthy, as do the Dolphins, who have lost 3 of the 4 games he's been out and are now sitting at 2-4. Another quarterback who's battling injury is Jayden Daniels, who exited the game in the first quarter with a rib injury. During the game, his mom actually tweeted out saying he's fine. Then yesterday, Dan Quinn said he's week to week with the injury, but is hopeful that he's good to go next Sunday against the Bears. I selfishly hope he's healthy for that game because I would love to see him go toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams in a battle of first and second overall picks. If he's not healthy enough to play, it's going to be Marcus Mariota who will get the start, and he actually played really well in Jayden's absence. He was 18 of 23 for 205 yards and 2 tutties, leading Washington to a 40-7 beatdown against the Panthers. Next up, the Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams reunion did not go as planned for the duo. They played the Steelers in Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football, and instead of the Rodgers and Adams show, it was the Russell Wilson show who got his first start as a Steeler after Mike Tomlin made the change from Fields to Russ earlier in the week. I'll be honest, it did not start out great for Russ. He was actually getting booed by the crowd. They had multiple 3-and-outs, and Russ looked rusty. Haha. The Steelers found themselves quickly down 15-6 as well in the second quarter. But then Russ turned on the stove, not the microwave that he'd been using in Denver, but the stove, and began to cook. He made multiple big throws to George Pickens, including this insane bobbling catch as Pickens finally looked the number 1 receiver the Steelers hoped he could be, but never really got to be with Justin Fields throwing him the ball. All in all, Russ finished with 264 yards and 2 touchdowns, with 1 going to Pickens, and he also got in on this QB sneak in the third quarter. So after going down 15-6, the Steelers scored 31 unanswered points and smoked the Jets like Snoop Dogg before a concert, 37-15. The defense once again reminded us how elite they are, completely shutting the Jets offense out in the second half and picking Aaron Rodgers off not once, but twice. Davante Adams was held to just 3 catches for 30 yards, with his standout play of the game probably being this tackle he made on one of Aaron Rodgers' interceptions. New York's leading receiver was actually Breece Hall, who eclipsed the 100-yard mark thanks in part to a short pass in the first quarter that he turned into a 57-yarder. But yeah, things are not great for the Jets right now, as they just traded a third-round pick for the soon-to-be 32-year-old Davante Adams. Yet they just dropped to 2-5 and have a major uphill climb to even make the playoffs. As for the Steelers, they improved to 5-2, and if Russ can play like this consistently, they really do have a shot at a deep playoff run considering how special that defense is. You got to give credit to Mike Tomlin, who told Jay Glazer that he went, quote, Lone Ranger on the decision to start Russ over Justin Fields. Well, it paid off big time on Sunday night, and when asked about that decision after the game, he had this to say.
That's why I'm well compensated. Thank you.
That may be one of the best mic drop moments I've ever heard. Legendary stuff from Mikey T, who was definitely feeling himself after that dub. Next up, there were 2 Monday night games played last week, with the first one being the Ravens and the Buccaneers. The Bucs started out hot, taking an early 10-zip lead as Baker Mayfield connected with Mike Evans on a 25-yard touchdown. That touchdown, by the way, marked 100 receiving touchdowns for Mike Evans within 11 seasons. The only other players to do that, by the way, is Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Marvin Harrison, and Terrell Owens. So Mike Evans is elite, and he is a for sure destined to be Hall of Famer. Anyway, with that 25-yard strike, it was 10-zip, but Mark Andrews scored one of his 2 touchdowns on the night to put the Ravens on the board. Baker again tried targeting Mike Evans in the end zone, but he couldn't hang on, and sadly re-aggravated his hamstring, not getting up for a bit here, and was ruled out for the rest of the game. We're still waiting to find out the severity of it at the moment, but some are assuming, doctors, people smarter than me, that he misses at least the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'm just hoping it's not similar to Nico Collins and his hamstring injury. He came into the game injured with the hamstring, tried to play through it, and then ended up on IR. Anyway, on that same drive, Baker had about 14 decades to throw here and decided to toss it directly to Marlon Humphrey, which was a huge swing in this game. The Bucs had a chance to go up 17-7, and instead Baker throws a costly pick, and this sparked a huge run for the Ravens. 34 unanswered points were scored by Baltimore, and Tampa not scoring again until the fourth quarter. Lamar Jackson was playing out of his mind. He threw for 5 touchdowns and 281 yards with a near-perfect passer rating, and he also rushed for 52 yards on 9 carries. He and Derrick Henry are basically unstoppable right now. King Henry rushed for 169 nice yards, including this 81-yard run in the third quarter. He now has 873 rushing yards, which obviously leads the league, and is 200 more than Jordan Mason, who has the second most yards. Now, the Bucs were able to score a couple garbage time touchdowns to save face, but on their last drive with about a minute left in the game, basically out of reach, Chris Godwin caught this ball and was tackled by Roquan Smith with his ankle getting caught underneath him, and you could tell right away this was a serious injury. Cart came out. Crowd was silent. It was not good at all. Todd Bowles shared after the game it was a dislocated ankle. But rewind back to him getting carted off. Look at this. Godwin was on the cart, and he appeared to say back to work a couple of times, which honestly says a lot about his mindset moving forward. He's slated to be a free agent next year, so it's indeed back to work, with his job being rehab, recovery, and aiming to get a big contract in the offseason. I don't know if it's with the Bucs or somebody else, but that is his goal right now. Ian Rappaport confirmed all this morning when he tweeted out saying Chris Godwin will undergo surgery on his dislocated ankle this week. He'll see a doctor today to determine the damage and is expected to make a full recovery for 2025, again, when he will be a free agent. This is just terrible news for the Bucs and Godwin himself, who was having a career year leading the league in receptions, second in yards, and he was also tied for third most touchdowns. So not only did the Bucs lose Mike Evans to what could end up being a serious hamstring injury, time will tell, but then they lose their leading receiver who was playing at an all-pro level this year, both in the same game. Tampa is now 4-3, still number 1 in the NFC South. But what the heck are they going to do at receiver? Cade Otton, their tight end, should see an uptick in targets, but as far as receivers go, their next 2 leading receivers are 31-year-old Sterling Shepard and rookie Jalen McMillan, both of which have under 100 yards on the season. Well, I think it's safe to say that the Bucs might be in some serious trouble here. They lost their top 2 targets in the same game, took an L, and head coach Todd Bowles came under a bit of fire for continuing to play his starters that late into the game. I mean, it was basically over. You could, yes, in theory, potentially score a touchdown or make a field goal, then recover another onside kick, something they did do shortly before the Godwin injury. But it was a very outside chance of them being able to pull off a W like that. And that's where I'll pass the question off to you guys. Do you think Todd Bowles is at fault here for still playing starters that late in the game down by more than 1 score? Or nah, he's doing what any head coach is supposed to do, trying to win a game, and that is just sadly an unfortunate part of playing this violent sport. Let me know either way in the comments down below. Now, for that other Monday night game, much less exciting, but it was behind a paywall on ESPN+. The Cardinals ended up eking out a W over the Chargers thanks to a last-second field goal from Chad Ryland. The Cardinals were down 15-14 late in the fourth, and they moved down the field thanks to an unnecessary roughness call as the defender led with the crown of his helmet. Here, James Conner then turned this short pass into a huge gain that allowed the Cardinals to kneel out the clock and win it all with the walk-off field goal. It was kind of ironic. The Chargers' only points of the game came on 5 field goals from Dicker, the kicker, and they ultimately lost on a field goal after the Cardinals hadn't made one before all game long. Justin Herbert, get this, he had nearly 350 yards, but the Chargers couldn't finish drives. That killed them in this one. And here's how crazy this really is. Justin Herbert played so well that no other quarterback in NFL history has thrown for that many yards with that high of a passer rating, and yet had his team fail to score a touchdown and lose the game. So the Chargers continue charging and making history for all the wrong reasons. Kyler Murray, meanwhile, didn't do a lot with his arm, but he had this electric 44-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter and finished with 6 carries for 64 yards. Got to give credit to the Cardinals defense, though. They kept LA out of the end zone and bottled up J.K. Dobbins as he had just 40 yards on 14 carries. The Chargers proceeded to drop to 500 on the year, while the Cardinals moved to 3-4. So there you have it. What a crazy week in the NFL that was sadly filled with tons of injuries to star players from all around the league. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.